My father handed my sister the keys to the kingdom. I got a check for $40,000 and a mop bucket. He laughed when I took the janitor job. But in the water of that bucket, I could see the reflection of the skyscraper, the one I was about to own. My name is Mia Rogers. I am 34 years old. I am not the person my father sees. I am an architect. I am a project developer. I have awards sitting in a storage unit back in the Midwest, plaques with my name etched into brass, collecting dust because I made the mistake of moving to Rutherford City. I came here not for the skyline, but because this is where Robert Brooks held court. Brooks Urban Holdings, my father, and where my father held court. My sister, Laurel, was the main attraction. She was the face, the one with the perfect smile and the easy charm who secured the dinner meetings. I was the structural engineer, the one who knew how the bones held the skin together. Laurel just knew how to dress the skin. She thrived on the reflection of the glass. I designed the glass. The call came on a Tuesday in March. A stroke, massive. Robert Brooks, the titan of Rutherford's development scene, was suddenly horizontal, tangled in tubes in a private room I was expected to pay for. Laurel was in Milan, or perhaps it was Berlin that week. She was cementing European partnerships, which was her elegant term for shopping and attending galas on the company dime. I was 3 days away from breaking ground on the Kestrel Pier project, a design that had already won the Callaway Grant, a complex, beautiful structure that would have been my masterpiece. I hung up with the hospital, called my foreman, and put the project on indefinite hold. The investors were furious. I didn't care. I traded my blueprints for antiseptic wipes. I learned the rhythms of the ICU, the precise high-pitched beep of the heart monitor, the pervasive, sharp smell of rubbing alcohol and slow, simmering fear. For 8 months, I was the one holding the cup of water to his lips. I was the one arguing with insurance companies. I managed the night nurse. I sat through 3 hours of grueling physical therapy every single day, forcing his slack limbs to remember what they were for. Laurel sent tasteful, enormous bouquets of white lilies from her Parisian hotel, the kind of flowers you send to a funeral. She networked. I emptied bedpans. I convinced myself this was duty. I told myself this was what a daughter did. I told myself that when he recovered, he would finally see. He recovered. He recovered almost completely. The man who sat at the head of the dining room table 2 weeks after his release was 90% of the man who had collapsed. The missing 10% was his soul, or maybe just his gratitude. The strength returned to his limbs, and the cruelty returned to his voice. He convened a meeting. Not in the hospital, not in the quiet of his study, but in the main boardroom on the Fort Glorious 40th floor of the Brooks building. Laurel flew back. First class. She was tanned, rested, and brimming with continental anecdotes. She looked appropriately concerned, but her eyes were sharp. This was her moment, and Robert gave it to her. He announced his retirement, effective immediately, the assets, the portfolio, the proxy votes, and the CEO chair of Brooks Urban Holdings were transferred to Laurel. My name was not mentioned. After the applause from the board members, Laurel's new board members died down. He slid a thin envelope across the table toward me. Inside was a check, $40,000, and his old watch, not the gold one he wore to board meetings, the steel one he used to wear on weekends, the one with the cracked leather strap and a scratch on the crystal. It was not an inheritance. It was a severance package. $40,000 for 8 months of my life, for the death of the Kestrel Pier project, for my entire stalled career. We had dinner that night, a celebration, he called it. The neon glow of Rutherford City bled through the penthouse windows, staining the white carpets purple and toxic blue. The air smelled of expensive scotch and Laurel's victorious perfume, something heavy and sweet. I hadn't touched the check. It sat in my coat pocket, feeling heavy and profoundly insulting. "Mia," Robert said, raising his glass. His voice was almost back to its full, resonant baritone. "Always the dreamer. Still playing with those little sketches. Are we?" I looked at my hands. These hands had balanced his checkbook, signed his physical therapy releases, and designed a cantilevered bridge that critics had praised for its audacity. I was developing Kestrel Pier. Dad, it was fully funded. Yes, a hobby, he dismissed, waving his hand. Brooks Urban Holdings is in the real world. We build skyscrapers, not boardwalks. Laurel, seated opposite me, draped in red silk, gave me that smile. It was the smile of a predator that has just eaten and feels a slight, passing sympathy for the creature still twitching, a soft, pitying downturn of her lips. We all have our talents. Mia, she said, her voice smooth as cream. I handle the reality. You have your art. The reality was that I had managed his household staff for 8 months, discovered his previous CFO was skimming, and personally liquidated 2 of my own stock assets to cover the specialists his platinum insurance refused. The reality was that Laurel had spent 8 months finalizing an acquisition that only benefited her own new expense account. The next day, the family lawyer called me. Kendrick, a man who looked like he was carved from beige marble, devoid of any feature that might betray an emotion. His office smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and quiet threats. A few loose ends, Mia, he said. He did not ask how I was. He pushed a thick, bound document across the expanse of polished mahogany. It was a comprehensive waiver. I was relinquishing all future claims, all inheritance, all stock options, all rights to the family name in a professional capacity. But buried in the fine print, on page 12, section 4, was the real insult, a non-competition clause. This is a non-compete, I said. My voice was flat, hollow in the quiet room. Standard procedure, Kendrick replied, not meeting my eyes. He studied a spot on his desk blotter. I am not an employee. The clause only activates, he said, tapping the page with a manicured finger. If you are classified as an employee, past or present, as you are no longer receiving compensation or benefits from the estate or the holding company, it's truly just a formality. A formality. They hadn't just disinherited me. They had reclassified me. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't even a partner who had saved the family patriarch. I was a potential liability, a former employee being terminated with a $40,000 handshake and a broken watch. I picked up his pen. It was a heavy, gold-plated thing, cold to the touch. I signed my name, Mia Rogers. I didn't sign Brooks. I hadn't used that name in a decade. I pushed the document back. This buys my freedom, I said. Kendrick actually looked up, surprised. He probably expected tears. He probably expected shouting. He probably expected me to beg. I left his office. I didn't take a cab. I walked 40 blocks in the stifling city air. The sound of traffic a dull roar in my ears. I walked past the office I had closed. I walked past the site of Kestrel Pier, now stalled. A chain-link fence around its perimeter. Another developer was already circling. I'd heard. Probably my father's company. I went to my small apartment, a place I'd kept instead of moving into the family compound, a place that smelled like my own coffee and my own tracing paper. I opened my personal safe, a small steel box hidden behind a framed blueprint. Inside was the watch, the uncashed check, and one other item, a single, sealed, 9x12 envelope. I had prepared it 6 months ago, during the 3rd month of his recovery, the first time I saw the way Laurel looked at his empty desk, not with concern, but with measurement. On the front of the envelope, in my own neat, architectural print, were 2 words, Halcyon Tower, the Halcyon Tower. It was the new heart of Rutherford City, a spire of blue glass and advanced engineering that had redefined the skyline. It was the ultimate symbol of financial power. It was the trophy my father had always wanted but never managed to acquire. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my laptop. The smell of the city, the rain on the pavement, came through the open window. I didn't look at architecture forums. I didn't look at job sites for developers. I went to the service portal for Rutherford Municipal Services, a third-party contractor, one of hundreds, handled the Halcyon's sanitation and night services. I typed in my information. I used my mother's maiden name. I checked the box for night shift, 3 a.m. to 11 a.m. The application was approved almost instantly. They were always short on night staff. My orientation was the following Monday. They thought I wanted to build. They thought my power was in my sketches. They were wrong. My power is in understanding systems. A building isn't just glass and steel. It's a nervous system. It has arteries, the HVAC, the data lines. It has a brain, the server room. It has a digestive tract, the waste removal. And it has a circulatory system, the flow of people, the security checkpoints, the elevator logs. To own a building, you don't start at the penthouse, you start in the basement. I needed to know the Halcyon Tower's nervous system. I needed to know the security patrols, their blind spots, the exact minute they changed shifts. I needed to know the access codes for the freight elevators. I needed to know the maintenance schedule for the digital ownership board in the lobby, the giant LED screen that told the world who mattered. I was done arguing. I was done trying to prove my worth to Robert or Laurel. I was done talking. The next time they heard my name, it would be an echo. It would be the sound of a door locking them out. I locked the door to my apartment. I picked up my new uniform, a dark blue polo shirt and utility pants that smelled faintly of industrial starch. I slipped my new ID card into my back pocket. Temp janitorial. My hand went into my other pocket. My fingers brushed against a second card. This one was heavy, platinum, almost white. It had no name. No magnetic strip, just an embedded chip and 3 letters etched into the metal. HLC, HLC Trust. I stepped into the elevator, the cheap fluorescent light of my apartment hallway buzzing overhead. I looked at my reflection in the scratched metal door. The temp card got me into the building. The platinum card got me the building. I will mop the floors where tomorrow they will bow their heads to read my name in the sky. Mr. Keene was a man made of right angles and drywall dust. He was the night shift supervisor, and his entire world was contained in the service levels beneath the Halcyon Tower. He smelled like industrial-strength coffee and keycard. "The route is the route," he said, his voice a gravelly monotone that bounced off the polished concrete walls of the staging area. "You don't deviate from the route." I nodded, my new blue uniform already feeling stiff and foreign. The basement smelled of ozone, damp concrete, and the sharp, pine-scented disinfectant that would become the perfume of my new life. He handed me a laminated map. Level B3 is waste management, B2 is engineering and water, B1 is freight receiving. You, he said, tapping my chest with a thick finger, are on the prime route, lobby, mezzanines 1 and 2, and the executive washrooms on 28. He didn't know he had just given me the keys to the central nervous system. For 3 weeks, I became a ghost. I learned the building's nocturnal rhythm. It was a precise, digital heartbeat thrumming beneath the city's notice. I learned that the freight elevators, the ones that could take you anywhere without a high-level keycard scan, were locked down for inventory from midnight until 12:30 a.m. I learned that the security team changed shifts at precisely 11:15 p.m. For a window of about 90 seconds, the lobby desk was unmonitored as the night guard. Jules traded logs with the evening guard. I learned that the building's automated fire suppression and emergency response system, a massive-scale PCCC test, ran a diagnostic every night at 1:40 a.m. During that 3-minute test, the internal security camera feeds would momentarily freeze as the system rebooted, section by section, and I learned the route. I pushed my cart of chemicals and microfiber cloths. I polished the same black marble floors I had once specified in a college design proposal. I emptied trash cans filled with discarded printouts of stock figures and expensive catering receipts. I was invisible, and in my invisibility, I saw everything. One night, or rather, one morning at 2:30 a.m., the main lobby doors hissed open. This was unusual. The lobby was a tomb at this hour, lit only by the faint blue glow of the massive 20-foot-tall digital ownership wall. It was Laurel. She was not in her night shift clothes. She wore a tailored white pantsuit and heels that clicked with an obnoxious, piercing sound in the silence. She was followed by 3 people in black, carrying clipboards and light meters, a PR team. "The lighting here is terrible," she was saying, gesturing to the expanse of marble I had just buffed. "It needs to be warmer. Robert wants this to feel like a new era, a seamless transition." One of the PR flunkies nodded obsequiously. "Of course, Ms. Brooks, we'll have a full lighting rig brought in. For the press conference, we'll have the Brooks Urban Holdings logo projected right here, maybe superseding the building name for the event." Laurel smiled. "I like that. The Brooks New Era at Halcyon. It has a ring." I was behind my cart, in the shadow of a ficus plant the size of a car, wiping down a stainless steel support column. She looked right past me. I was not a sister. I was not an architect. I was not even a person. I was part of the scenery, a utility, like the mop in my hand. I watched them pace out the lobby. They were planning a party for an empire they thought they controlled. They had no idea the foundation was already gone. My eyes drifted from Laurel to the wall she was planning to deface with her logo, the ownership wall. It was a beautiful, stupid piece of technology, a sheet of seamless LEDs displaying the current legal owner, Harbor Pike Re, next to the wall. Hidden by a flush-mounted panel painted to match the surrounding stone was a small, locked closet. CS11, Com Server 11. I knew from the building schematics, the ones I had acquired long before I applied for this job, that this closet didn't just hold fiber optic routers. It held the dedicated server that fed the ownership wall its data. The server received a daily update, a data push at 6 a.m. sharp, directly from the Rutherford County Registry of Deeds. I continued my route, the squeak of my rubber-soled shoes the only sound. The next day, a woman in a crisp gray suit and a hard hat showed up in the B2 engineering level. She carried a digital hygrometer and a clipboard. She looked official. Mr. Keene, who hated anyone breaking his routine, was visibly annoyed. "Building inspection," she said, her voice sharp, focusing on energy compliance and humidity in the sublevels. She moved with purpose. She was not a city inspector. I knew her walk. Her name was Sarah Lang. She was the best private security and technical surveillance countermeasures expert I had ever worked with. She had swept my Kestrel Pier offices for bugs twice. I was emptying a trash receptacle near the main capacitor bank. She walked past me, measuring the wall. As she passed, her sleeve brushed mine. It was an accident that was not an accident. She didn't look at me. "Package from HLC is secure," she murmured, her voice barely a breath above the hum of the transformers. "Data is clean. You were right." She was gone. She had confirmed it. The plan I had set in motion 6 months ago. The day I realized my father's recovery was not a recovery, but a coronation for my sister, was locked in place. It had started in the office of Eden March. Eden was my lawyer, a woman who understood that the most brutal weapons in Rutherford City weren't guns. They were covenants, clauses, and shell corporations. "He's giving it all to Laurel," I had said, sitting in her sterile white office. Eden looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Okay, do you want to contest the will? It will be bloody, long, and you will likely lose." "No," I said. "I don't want his company. I don't want his name. I want to build. He's trying to stop me. I want to take the ground out from under his feet." "The ground, or the glass tower?" Eden asked, a very faint smile playing on her lips. "The Halcyon Tower," I said. "He's been trying to get a controlling stake in it for a decade. Laurel thinks she's going to announce it as her first major acquisition. I know for a fact she's planning to use Brooks Holdings funds to buy out Harbor Pike." "So you want to buy it first?" "I want to own it first," I corrected. "I don't have that kind of capital, but I have this." I slid the sealed envelope across her desk, the one marked Halcyon Tower. Inside was not money, it was research. My architecture firm wasn't just my passion, it was my cover. While I was designing bridges, I was also running debt analysis. HLC Trust was born that day. HLC, my mother's initials. Through Eden, we structured it. HLC Trust was the beneficiary. The trust itself was held by a series of nested LLCs, Anonymous and Bland, Northline Properties, Vireo Holdings, names that sounded like suburban real estate firms. We didn't buy the building, we bought its debt. The original owner, Harbor Pike RE, had built the Halcyon on a mountain of high-interest bonds and a massive leveraged loan. They were bleeding money, struggling to find the high-rent tenants they needed. They were desperate. HLC Trust, through its LLCs, quietly, piece by piece, bought those bonds. We bought the distressed mezzanine loan from a secondary lender in Singapore. We became the primary creditor. Harbor Pike had no idea. They were still paying their checks to the same bank, but the bank was now just a servicing agent for us, and in that loan agreement, buried on page 82, was the kill switch, a springing ownership clause. It meant that if Harbor Pike defaulted on any of its loan covenants, the beneficiary of the debt HLC Trust was not required to go through a messy public foreclosure. The ownership of the property, the deed itself, would spring immediately and irrevocably to the beneficiary. They just had to be in default, and I, as the beneficiary, had to be the one to prove it. Which brought me back to the basement of the Halcyon Tower. I finished my route and clocked out. I went home, slept for 4 hours, and then went to my real office. I opened the file Sarah had inspected. The building was in violation, a flagrant one. My architectural specialty was sustainable design. I knew exactly what to look for. The Halcyon had been marketed as a LEED Platinum building, a model of energy efficiency, but to cut costs, Harbor Pike had skimped on the auxiliary power grid. The covenant in Section 5.2c of the loan agreement was specific: the auxiliary power system must maintain a 99% efficiency rating, tested quarterly. Sarah's data, pulled directly from the engineering logs I now had janitorial access to, showed the truth. The system had not performed above 91% for 4 consecutive quarters. For an entire year, Harbor Pike had been in default. They had been cooking the books, filing false reports to the bank. But the bank didn't care. The bank was just servicing the loan. I cared. I had been the rightful, hidden beneficiary of the Halcyon Tower for months. All I needed was a trigger, a final, undeniable, legally binding activation. Laurel's press conference gave me the date. She was announcing the Brooks New Era. She was going to announce her intent to purchase the Halcyon. She was going to do it in my lobby. It was perfect. I sent the encrypted data package to Eden March. Her reply came back an hour later, a single, secure text message. The clock is set. The assignment of deed will be filed with the county registry at exactly 2 a.m., the night of the press conference. I need an indisputable, time-stamped visual confirmation of the covenant breach, recorded within the hour of the filing. A video. We need to prove the default was active at the moment of transfer. I looked at my uniform hanging on the door. I had to go back to the engineering level. I had to get a clear time-stamped shot of the capacitor logs on the main console. A console in a restricted room. A room I only had access to because I was the one who emptied its trash. I reached into my drawer and pulled out the small, button-sized body camera I had purchased with a fraction of my $40,000 insult. I calibrated the lens. I clipped it to the inside of my uniform shirt. The tiny lens perfectly aligned with the second button. I was ready for my last shift. I wasn't just going to mop the floor. I was going to document the crime that would give me the building. The Rutherford City papers were already printing Laurel's lies, fed to them by her high-priced PR team. The centerpiece of the Brooks New Era was a signed, exclusive lease agreement with Medisilv, the pharmaceutical giant. It was touted as a billion-dollar deal. I had seen the document. It was a memorandum of understanding, a non-binding agreement to discuss a lease. In our world, an MOU is worth less than the recycled paper it's printed on. It's a prop for a press conference, nothing more. My father, meanwhile, was operating in the dark. He was busy planning his victory lap. He believed the Halcyon Tower was still firmly in the grasp of Harbor Pike RE. He thought his only maneuver was a standard, hostile buyout of their stock. He was a shark smelling blood, but he was swimming in the wrong ocean. He had no idea the debt, the real power, had been quietly reassigned months ago. He was still playing by the old rules, assuming ownership meant equity. He didn't understand that in modern finance, ownership means holding the note. I needed to be sure. I took my 10-minute break, sitting in the janitor's closet on B1. The smell of industrial bleach sharp in my nose. I used a burner phone to make the encrypted call. Eden March picked up on the first ring. Her voice was always clipped, devoid of emotion. "You're secure." "I'm in a closet," I said. "Go?" "The mechanism is solid," she said. "Robert and Laurel are behaving exactly as we predicted. They are focused on the equity. Harbor Pike Re, which is worthless. We are focused on the debt, which we now control through a shell corporation Harbor Pike itself set up. Harbor Pike Lending. It was a beautiful, simple, and catastrophic error on their part. They had separated the building from the debt, a common tax strategy. They never imagined someone would buy the debt and not the building. "When we file the notice of assignment," Eden continued, her voice sharp as breaking glass, "the deed in lieu of foreclosure provision activates." "Deed in lieu," I repeated. It was a beautiful phrase. It wasn't a hostile takeover, it was a voluntary surrender, pre-signed and buried deep in their original loan documents. "Exactly," Eden said. "They agreed to it when they signed the loan. If they breached the covenants, and we, the new note holder, could prove it, the deed transfers, no court, no fight, it's just paperwork. The assignment of rents activates concurrently. As of 2:07 a.m., every dollar of rent paid by every tenant in this building bypasses them and goes directly to HLC Trust." "And the triggers?" I asked. "You're certain we have them?" "We have two. The energy efficiency failure you and Sarah documented is the crowbar. It's our cause, but the bank account is the kill shot." I knew this part. Section 5.2c, the maintenance reserve account. Harbor Pike was required to keep a minimum of 120 days of operating capital in reserve. "They're short," Eden said, and I could almost hear a smile. "By about $2 million. They pulled the cash 3 weeks ago to pay for the lobbying on that failed Metasilv deal. They bet the farm. They lost. We file based on the reserve shortfall. The energy audit just proves they aren't capable of recovery. It's airtight. Mia, indisputable." "Good," I said. 2:07 a.m. I hung up and went back to my cart, the phone in my actual pocket. My personal phone, the one they knew about, buzzed. A text from Laurel. "Event is tomorrow at noon. Need you here by 10. You can help me stand by the backdrop. Wear the black dress. The simple one." I read the words 3 times. Help me stand by the backdrop. I was not family. I was set dressing. A prop. Just like her MOU. I looked at the text. The blue light illuminated my face in the dim service hallway. I didn't reply. I just put the phone away and continued polishing the brass fixtures, wiping away fingerprints I hadn't left. The clock on the wall read 1:30 a.m. It was time. The press conference was hours away. The filing was in 37 minutes. I needed the final piece of evidence. Sarah Lang was waiting in the B2 engineering level, disguised again, this time as a network technician testing cable integrity. She had a hard hat on and a diagnostic tool in her hand. "Keen," I whispered, my voice echoing slightly off the damp concrete. "Donut break," she replied, not looking up. "He's in the basement cafeteria. We have 10 minutes. The camera in this corridor loops on a 90-second delay. We move between the loops." We moved. We weren't sisters or colleagues. We were soldiers executing a plan, moving through the digital shadows of a building I was about to conquer. The restricted room, the one housing the auxiliary power grid's main console, was locked. Mr. Keen's master key, which I had borrowed and copied in wax 2 weeks prior. Opened it with a quiet, satisfying click. The room was loud, a constant, heavy hum from the transformers. The air was hot and smelled of burnt dust and ozone. And there, on the main diagnostic screen, was the entire story, written in glowing red text. Sarah aimed her diagnostic tool. It wasn't testing cables. It was a high-resolution forensic camera. The numbers on the screen were stark. Capacitor bank 4A efficiency rating, quarterly 90.8%. Capacitor bank 4B efficiency rating, quarterly 91.2%. System status. Covenant breach. Active, 288 days. 288 days, Sarah whispered, impressed. They've been driving this thing with the emergency brake on for almost a year. They've been filing fraudulent reports since day one. Get the timestamp, I said, my voice calm. My body camera, hidden in my shirt, was already running, the tiny lens capturing my perspective. I held my own burner phone up to the screen, displaying the official Rutherford Atomic Clock website. 1:47 a.m. Sarah captured it all, the red numbers on the screen, the breach notification, the time. Got it. Sending the packet to the engineer. The engineer was Tomas Avery, the former head of engineering for Harbor Pike, the man they had fired for insubordination when he refused to sign off on the falsified efficiency reports. I had found him 6 months ago, working a dead-end consulting job. He was now an anonymous and very wealthy. Principal in HLC Trust. Sarah uploaded the encrypted file, 1,000 miles away, in a secure office. Tomas Avery received it. He analyzed the data, confirmed it matched his own hidden logs, and applied his digital signature, his e-sign, as a certified and bonded engineer, turned the video from a recording into a legal affidavit. The affidavit was automatically appended to the file package and transmitted to Eden March. It was 1:58 a.m. We were out. We were back in the hallway. Sarah peeling off her gloves when the clock ticked over. 2 a.m. We were mopping the freight bay when my burner phone vibrated once. A single text from Eden. 0207. Filed. Notice of assignment is now public record in the county database. The deed is ours. The clock is ticking. The trap was set. The transfer was done. But the world didn't know it yet. The ownership wall in the lobby, the one Laurel was so eager to project her name onto, still read Harbor Pike Lending. Why? Because the system was automated. Like everything else in this building, it ran on a schedule. The server in closet CS11, the one I had identified my first week, was programmed to query the Rutherford County Registry of Deeds database once every 24 hours. At exactly 6 a.m., in just under 4 hours, that server would refresh, see the new filing, and update the wall. I had hours to kill. I spent them meticulously cleaning the lobby, the very lobby where Laurel would soon host her phantom victory party. At 4:30 a.m., my personal phone buzzed again, a social media notification. Laurel. She had posted a story on Instagram. A professional, pre-shot photo of herself standing in front of the Halcyon Tower, the glass spire glowing behind her. The caption was unbearable. Tomorrow, we step into the future. Honored to be speaking under the Halcyon logo as we officially begin the Brooks new era. The future of Rutherford is Brooks. She was speaking under the Halcyon logo, but she had no idea the logo was about to change. I finished my shift at 5:30 a.m. The rest of the crew was in the break room, the smell of stale coffee and microwave burritos filling the air. I stayed in the lobby. I had one last spot to clean. I pushed the bucket of gray water toward the center of the atrium. I dipped the mop. I started polishing the black marble directly beneath the massive, dark LED screen. I looked up at the black, silent wall. It was 5:59 a.m. It still said, Harbor Pike Lending. Laurel was asleep, dreaming of her triumph. My father was asleep, dreaming of his dynasty. I was wide awake, holding a mop, looking at my own faint reflection in the stone. I smiled at the dark screen as the clock turned. I didn't clock out. My shift wasn't over. It was just beginning. Instead of heading home, I walked to the 24-hour deli on the corner, the one that smelled of burnt coffee and yeast. I returned to the Halcyon Tower at 5:45 a.m., carrying 2 large pink boxes, and took the service elevator down to the B1 sublevel. The break room was a concrete box painted a nauseating shade of pale green, lit by buzzing fluorescent tubes. It smelled, as it always did, of stale coffee, microwave sausage, and the faint, damp wool odor of coats drying on the radiator. "You're still here, Mia." Jules, the night guard, looked up from his folded newspaper. "Long night," I said. I placed the boxes on the table. "Thought we earned some donuts." Rosa, who supervised the cleaning crew for the upper floors, was already reaching for a glazed one. Her hands were raw and chapped, the knuckles split from the chemicals, despite the gloves we were supposed to wear. "You are a good woman, Mia," she said, her voice heavy with the fatigue of the shift. I sat on the cracked vinyl bench. We were a small, tired island of humanity in a billion-dollar tomb. Rosa ate her donut slowly, staring at the wall. "My cousin," she said, her voice quiet. "She worked for the last contractor here, Citywide Services, before this new batch. You know they went bankrupt." I nodded, watching her. "They just stopped paying. The last 3 checks, bounced, $4,300, gone." She shook her head, the anger beneath her exhaustion palpable. "She called the labor board. You know, they put her on a list. She's still waiting. That was 9 months ago. How do you feed your kids when you're on a list?" I looked at Rosa's chapped hands. I thought of my father, who would view $4,300 as an accounting error, a rounding. For Rosa's cousin, it was the line between her apartment and the street. I pulled out my burner phone, the one Eden March used to contact me. I opened a file I had pre-drafted weeks ago. A simple, 1-page addendum to the HLC Trust's operating agreement. It was full of legalese, but it was, in essence, a promise. I typed a new line item under Operating Expenditures, the Halcyon People Fund. I designated an initial funding amount, a number large enough to cover Rosa's cousin and 100 others like her. This wasn't charity, it was an operating expense, the cost of doing business correctly. I saved the file. It was locked in, legally binding, a non-negotiable part of the new ownership. Jules sighed, folding his paper. He finished his Boston cream, wiping the powdered sugar on his dark blue uniform pants. He looked more than just end-of-shift tired. He looked worn down to the studs. "You okay, Jules?" I asked. He rubbed his eyes, the skin around them puffy. "My boy, Leo." He kept a small, laminated photo taped to his security monitor, a kid with a bright, unfocused smile. "He has his therapy today. He's autistic," Jules said, his voice dropping. He rarely talked about this. Non-verbal, mostly, but this new program we got him into, it's sensory integration. They use lights, different colors, different brightness. It helps him connect. I don't know how, but it's working. A rare, small smile touched his lips, then vanished. "But this," he said, waving a hand at the buzzing fluorescent tubes above us. "This light is killing me. I sit in here for my 30-minute break, and my skull feels like it's going to split. I get migraines that last for hours. How am I supposed to go home and be good for him when the break room feels like an interrogation cell?" I looked at the lights. He was right. They were cheap, flickering, and cast a sickly green-yellow pallor on everyone. They were designed for cost, not for human beings. "What if they weren't?" I said quietly. "What? The lights? What if they were indirect warmer, dimmable? What if this room had sound-dampening panels, and a wall you could change the color of, like Leo's therapy?" Jules laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Yeah, right. And what if I was the CEO? These companies, they don't care. We're the night shift. We're invisible. They just want us to scrub the toilets and stay out of sight of the daytime people." "We're invisible." He said the word, the one that had been echoing in my head for months. My father, Laurel, their entire empire. They looked at the building, at the reflection of the sky in the glass, at the name on the lease. They never looked in it. They never saw the sweat on the floors, the fingerprints on the brass that had to be polished away. They never saw the migraines of the people who kept their precious asset from falling apart. Their entire dynasty was built on the backs of people they refused to see. The break room door swung open, and Amar, one of the junior building engineers, stormed in, wiping grease from his hands with a red rag. He was always complaining, but tonight he looked furious. He grabbed a plain donut and bit into it savagely. "That damn auxiliary Jenny," he grumbled, mostly to himself. "They're going to push it until it blows. I swear to God." My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice calm. "Generator. The auxiliary system," he said, mouthful of donut. "The one for the supplemental power grid. Harbor Pike. Those cheap bastards. They've been running it non-stop, trying to save money on the main grid during peak billing hours. It's not designed for that. It's an emergency system. It's supposed to run maybe 10 hours a year. They're running it 10 hours a week." My heart was beating a slow, heavy drum. This was it. This was the human confirmation of my legal trigger. "When do they run it?" I asked, trying to sound like a curious janitor. "All the time. But mostly late, after midnight. They think no one's watching the meters. But I am." He tapped his temple. "I see the logs. The efficiency is in the toilet. Those capacitors are overheating. I told my boss, and he told me to recalibrate the sensors." He snorted. "Recalibrate. That's code for lie. That's code for falsify the report." My covenant. My breach. My beautiful, undeniable covenant breach. It wasn't just numbers on a screen I had filmed with Sarah. It was Amar's nightly headache. It was a system being pushed to failure by people who only looked at the next billing cycle. "That's crazy, man," I said, getting up, suddenly needing to move. "Someone should do something." "Yeah, well," Amar said. "No one's doing nothing." I left the break room. The conversations echoed in my head. Rosa's stolen wages, Jules's migraines, Amar's ignored warnings. This wasn't just a building, it was a living ecosystem, and the parasites were running it. I went to the women's locker room, a small, damp space on the same level. It was 5:58 a.m. I sat on the metal bench, the smell of damp towels and cheap soap in the air. I pulled out my burner phone and drafted an email to Eden March. The subject line was simple: Contingency Azure. The body was just as brief. Effective immediately upon registry update. 1. Terminate existing sanitation and security contracts for cause breach of labor standards and safety compliance. 2. Activate HLC contracts with A+ Security and Apex Cleaners. 3. Disperse Halcyon People Fund initial allocations per attached. See you at noon. I had vetted A+ and Apex weeks ago. They were smaller, local firms, but they guaranteed a living wage, benefits, and most importantly, they paid on time. I hit Save Draft. I would send it the moment I saw the wall change. Next, I used my real phone. I made a call. It rang twice. Quill. Mara Quill was the best creative director in Rutherford. She was a visual genius who was notoriously allergic to corporate hypocrisy. We had almost worked together on Kestrel Pier. "Mara, it's Mia Rogers." A pause. "Mia, I thought you'd fallen off the earth. Heard about your father. And Laurel. Tough break." "It's a clean break," I said. "Listen, I have a 24-hour timeline. I need a full corporate identity and wayfinding package. Total rebrand. New logo. New mission. New signage. From the digital displays to the bronze plaques in the elevators." Mara laughed. "A rebrand, Mia. That's a 6-month job. What's the project? A coffee shop?" The Halcyon Tower. The silence on the other end was absolute. "You're not serious," Mara said, her voice dropping, all humor gone. "As a heart attack," I said. "I take legal possession today. The current branding is compromised. I need something new by tomorrow. End of day." Another pause. I could hear her thinking. "Who's the client?" "Me, HLC Trust, and I'm renaming it the Halcyon Life Center." "Halcyon. Life Center," she repeated, testing the words. "Okay, not just Halcyon. You're changing the meaning. I like it. You're flipping it. From cold finance to what people?" Exactly. The wayfinding, the mission statement, it all has to reflect that. It's not a monument, it's a vertical community. Health, wellness, and fair wages. That is the best pitch I've heard all year, Mara said, her voice electric. I'll clear the decks. Send me the schematics. You'll have concepts by 4 p.m. Thank you, Mara. Don't thank me, she said. Just pay my invoice. And Mia, welcome back. I hung up. I opened a blank document on my phone. I had to write a speech, not for the press conference Laurel was planning. For my press conference, the one I had scheduled for 12:45 p.m., the one I'd sent anonymous invites to the real financial press for, the ones who cared about debt and defaults, not just shiny PR. I started writing. My name is Mia Rogers. No, I deleted it. Today, Brooks Urban Holdings. No, I would not say their names. Not his, not hers. This wasn't about them. This was about the floor. I started again. I thought about Rosa, Jules, and Amar. A building is not its glass. It is not its height. It is not the name on the lease. A building is the people who keep it running. I wrote for 10 minutes. A 5-minute speech. 5 minutes for the invisible. My phone vibrated. A text from Sarah. Locker room route is clean. Service elevator 4 is tagged for maintenance from 11:45 a.m. It will take you from the B1 locker room directly to the press staging area behind the podium. You will be invisible until you choose not to be. Perfect, I whispered. It was 5:59 a.m. I stood up. I walked out of the locker room and back into the main service corridor. My shift was ending. My bucket and mop were waiting where I left them, next to the freight elevator. I picked up the mop. The handle was smooth, worn wood. I thought about my father's laugh, a janitor. He saw it as the ultimate failure, the bottom. He was wrong. It wasn't the bottom, it was the foundation. I took a black permanent marker from my utility bag. On the wooden handle, in my neat, architectural print, I wrote 5 words, property of HLC. It was a private joke, a promise. I pushed the card out into the lobby. I looked up at the massive black digital wall. The time on my watch read 5:59 and 58 seconds. I took a deep breath, the smell of pine disinfectant and my own quiet victory filling my lungs. The lobby was silent. And then, the clock ticked over. The night shift is a vacuum. There is no sound but the low mechanical breathing of the building. The constant thrumming hum of the ventilation system is the only music. It's a sound that gets into your bones. It's the sound of emptiness, of air being moved around to keep the glass clean and the executives comfortable. My personal phone, the one I kept for the life I had before, vibrated in my utility pocket, rattling against my stolen box cutter. It was 3:12 in the morning. I knew who it was. Only one person would call me at this hour, expecting me to answer. I let it vibrate 3 times, then stepped into the fire stairwell, the heavy metal door hissing shut behind me, plunging me into the flat, acoustic deadness of concrete and steel. I clicked the answer button. Dad. Mia, Robert's voice, still gravelly from the stroke, but the authority was back, sharp and absolute. He never asked how I was. He never bothered with pleasantries. You'll be at the press conference today, he stated. It was not a question. I have my shift, I said. A weak, automatic protest I no longer meant. Your shift, he scoffed. The sound was like static. You'll be done with that foolishness. Be there at noon. Laurel needs the support. You will stand behind her, to the left, while she speaks. Wear something dark, not distracting. Stand behind her. Be a shadow. Be the dark. Simple backdrop. I looked at the gray, painted concrete wall. The words were so easy. I just bought the building you're standing in. But that was not the plan. The plan was silence. The plan was the law. Yes, Dad, I said. The line clicked dead. He had already hung up. I stood in the stairwell for a full minute, the smell of curing paint and dust filling my lungs, the weight of his command, his casual, crushing dismissal of my life, settled on me. I went down to the B1 locker room. The donuts from earlier were gone, leaving only a sticky pink smear in the cardboard box. In my locker, beneath my change of clothes, was a small, tin box. It had been my mother's. I opened it. Inside, past old photos, was a single folded piece of stationery, the paper soft as cloth. Her handwriting was elegant, a looped cursive from a different era. It was the last letter she wrote before the illness took her. Back when I was still in architecture school, Mia, your light is too bright to be borrowed. Never let anyone, not your father, not a professor, not even me, make you dim it. Don't step out of the light for them. Make them step into yours. I folded the note. I put it in my pocket. My father told me to be a shadow. My mother told me to be the sun. I closed the locker. My burner phone buzzed. A different alert. An encrypted text from a number I didn't recognize. It was just a picture. No text. My blood went cold. It was Laurel. She was at a restaurant. A dark, expensive-looking place. She was smiling, raising a glass. Across from her was a man I recognized, Richard Vale, the head of the PR firm she had just hired, the one organizing the press conference. They weren't just toasting, they were signing something. In the foreground, clear as day, was a document, a personal services contract, and a check, a kickback. She was signing a contract to pay his firm an obscene amount of company money, and he was signing a contract to give her 10% of it back. Personally, this was it. This was the scandal. This was the kind of weapon my father would use. This was the leverage he understood. I could leak this. I could destroy Laurel's reputation 5 minutes before she took the podium. I could end her new era with a single, anonymous email. It was dirty, it was fast, and it would be brutally effective. I stood there, looking at the proof of my sister's banal, stupid corruption. I could win the war right now, in the exact, ugly way they had always fought. My finger hovered over the forward button. I thought of my mother's letter. Make them step into yours. This wasn't my light. This was their darkness. Using this would make me just another Brooks, fighting for scraps with blackmail and betrayal. My victory had to be different. It had to be clean. It had to be structural. It had to be built on a foundation of fact, not on the shifting sands of scandal. I deleted the text. I deleted the photo. I deleted the anonymous number. I would win. But I would win with the truth, with the covenants, with the law. I went back to work. The hours bled together. 4 a.m., 4:30. The building was at its quietest. I finished the mezzanine level. The rhythmic swish of the mop the only sound. I finished early. At 4:59 a.m., I was back in the main lobby. The vast, empty space was mine. I stood in the center of the atrium, under the massive, dark LED wall. The only sound was the faint thunk of the employee time clock in the security office, the mechanism preparing for the morning rush. The silence was heavy. In it, I saw my past. I saw my studio, the one I had closed. I saw the shafts of morning light illuminating the dust motes dancing over my drafting table. I smelled the cold, stale coffee in the pot. I saw the Kestrel Pier blueprints, my masterpiece, pinned to the wall, waiting for a signature I never gave. I saw the awards I had won, packed in a box. I saw the 8 months of my life I had poured into nursing my father. The 8 months Laurel had used to sharpen her knives. I had traded my dream for his recovery, and he had thanked me with $40,000 and a broken watch. The rage was a cold, hard stone in my stomach. I had been silent for too long. My burner phone vibrated. A text from Eden. Registry has received the file. We are in the queue. My breath hitched. When, I texted back, the county system updates in automated batches. The file is locked. ETA for it to go public on the registry database is between 5:47 a.m. and 6:03 a.m. The window. This was the final hurdle. The space between filing and public record. It was time to light the fuse. I opened my calendar on my real phone. I created a new event. Event introduction. Halcyon Life Center. The new ownership. Time 12:45 p.m. Location. Halcyon Tower. Atrium. I went to the contact list I had built over the last 3 weeks. The real financial press, not Laurel's lifestyle bloggers. The debt analysts from the Journal. The toughest reporter from the Rutherford Business Chronicle. The City Council Planning Commission. I added them all. I hit send. The invitations were out. The first shot was fired. And they didn't even know they were at war. My burner phone buzzed again. A text from Sarah. It was a single photograph, taken from inside an elevator. It was a picture of the high-security keypad for the Penthouse Express elevator, the one that required a special coded card. In the photo, the card reader was glowing bright, clear green. The text below it read, "Penthouse access confirmed. The building already knows who you are. Mia." Even if the wall doesn't. A slow smile spread across my face. Of course, the HLC Trust card wasn't just a symbol. It was linked to the building's core systems. The moment the debt transferred, the building's internal security matrix had already recognized me as the new landlord. I had to finish my shift. I had one last task. I went to the executive suite on the 40th floor, Laurel's new floor. The lights were off, the offices pristine and waiting. I went to the kitchenette. The trash was full of champagne bottles and catering boxes from a celebration they'd had the day before. I pulled the heavy black plastic bag from the bin. It was heavy. I dragged it across the marble floor. I stopped in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city was a carpet of diamonds below. I saw my reflection in the dark glass. The blue janitorial shirt. The dark baseball cap pulled low to hide my hair. The reflection of the woman holding the trash bag. A janitor in the owner's cap. I pulled out my phone one last time. I opened the speech I'd written in the break room. I read it again. A building is not its glass. It is not its height. No names. No Robert. No Laurel. No family. It was clean. I hit save. I dragged the bag to the service elevator and rode it down to the lobby. The great hall was still dark. Still mine. I walked to the center of the atrium, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I looked at the digital clock on the far wall, the one above the security desk. It read 5:59. The ventilation fans hummed. The city held its breath. My shift was over. My new day was about to begin. I watched the seconds. 55, 56, 57. I thought of my father's laugh. 58. I thought of the mop handle. Property of HLC. 59. The lobby was dead silent. I heard the clock mechanism. A faint, mechanical click. The hour had turned. It was 5:59 and 59 seconds. The massive LED wall, dark for the past hour of system maintenance, flickered once, a rolling shudder of dead pixels, like a giant blinking. Then, the light returned. It was not the light from before. At 6 a.m. and 3 seconds, the text resolved. The server in closet CS11 had made its 6 a.m. query to the Rutherford County Registry. The server had found the new deed. The server had obeyed. The old text, Harbor Pike Re. The new text, HLC. Trust. Vireo Holdings. The letters were bright, white, and absolutely stable. Maya Tran, the day shift receptionist, was setting her purse down behind the sleek, white marble desk. She looked up at the wall, a motion she did 100 times a day, and froze. Her hand, holding her security badge, stopped mid-air. She hadn't finished her first cup of coffee. This was not possible. "What?" she whispered. "What is HLC Trust?" Jules, the night guard, was finishing his logbook, preparing for the handover to the day shift. He'd been watching me mop the atrium, wondering why I hadn't clocked out with the rest of the crew. He looked up at the wall where Maya was staring. He read the name. He read it again. He looked at me, standing still by my cart, my back to him, looking up at the board. "Mia," Jules said, his voice low, not sure if he should even speak. I think something big is happening." I didn't turn. I didn't move. I just kept looking at the name. It was beautiful. The main glass doors hissed open at 6:15 a.m., precisely on time. Laurel entered, not as a sister, but as a conqueror. She was in her power suit, a sharp, aggressive red. She was flanked by her PR team and a small, curated gaggle of lifestyle reporters and cameramen, invited for the pre-event setup shots. "All right," Laurel said, her voice bright and brittle, clapping her hands. "We'll stage the main podium here. I want the Halcyon logo directly behind me, and the Brooks Urban." She stopped. Her words trailed off. She was staring at the wall. One of the PR handlers, a young man with an earpiece, was also staring. "Ms. Brooks, what is Vireo Holdings? Is this part of the presentation? I didn't get that memo." Laurel's smile was frozen. It was a rictus. She blinked, twice, as if to clear the image. No, it's a glitch." She turned to the security desk, her voice suddenly sharp, slicing the air. "Maya, what is that call building management? Get that fixed. Now. I want it off." Maya, her hands trembling slightly, picked up the phone. Robert Brooks entered, slower than Laurel, his old authority radiating like a cold sun. "Laurel, why are we stopped? The journal crew gets here at 7. He followed her gaze, his face, which had been set in a pleased, patriarchal mask, tightened. "What is that?" he barked, the sound echoing in the atrium. "It's a technical error, Dad," Laurel snapped, her composure cracking for just a second. "Someone is playing a prank." Robert pulled out his phone. He didn't believe in pranks. He believed in incompetence or betrayal. He jabbed at the screen. "Kendrick, get to the Halcyon Tower. Now. The board is wrong. Someone is playing games. Fix it." I could imagine Kendrick, the beige lawyer, on the other end, sputtering, having no idea what was happening. At that exact moment, at 6:17 a.m., in her sterile office across town, Eden March hit send on a macro-enabled email. The email, which had been drafted for weeks, went out to over 200 recipients, every vendor contracted by Harbor Pike, every tenant in the building, from the law firms on floor 50 to the coffee shop on the mezzanine. It went to the building management office, the City Planning Commission, and the main desk of the Rutherford Business Chronicle. Attached was a single, 40-page PDF. The title was simple: Notice of Assignment of Deed Report on Covenant Breach Halcyon Tower. Inside was everything: the bank statements showing the reserve shortfall, the time-stamped video affidavit from Tomas Avery, the signed digital copy of the deed transfer. In the lobby, Maya's phone, the one she was using to call management, suddenly lit up with the email. The building manager's phone lit up. Robert's phone buzzed. While they were staring at their phones, another group moved in, a team of 4 people in black jumpsuits, led by Mara Quill herself, wheeled in a scaffold. They wore badges. Quill Creative, vendor. "What is this?" Laurel demanded, seeing them approach the wall. "Who are you? You can't be here." "New vendor," Mara said, not stopping. She was all business. "We're here on the new owner's orders, updating the signage." "I am the owner," Laurel shrieked, the sound high and thin. "No, ma'am," Mara said, pulling out a work order on a tablet. "According to our contract, activated at 6 a.m., HLC Trust is the owner." In one smooth motion, Mara's team unfurled a massive, opaque black vinyl sheet, covering the original, bronze-cast Halcyon logo that was mounted on the marble next to the LED screen. It was a blackout, a physical erasure. Behind it, I knew, was the new logo, the Halcyon Life Center, waiting to be unveiled. The lobby was descending into chaos. Laurel was yelling at Mara's team. Robert was yelling into his phone at Kendrick. The lifestyle reporters, smelling blood, were filming all of it, their faces a mixture of confusion and glee. This was a better story than a boring press conference. I chose that moment. I pushed my cart, the one with the property of HLC Mop, from its spot by the column. I pushed it right through the center of the atrium, right through the shot. Squeak, squeak, squeak went the wheels on the marble. "Out of the way," Laurel's PR flunky hissed at me. "Move the cleaning supplies." I kept pushing. One of the cameramen, a veteran, saw the motion. He saw the suited executives yelling. and he saw the one, calm janitor pushing her cart. His instincts took over. He swung his camera, a heavy broadcast rig, and followed me. The red light was on. I was in his frame. I passed the podium. I didn't look at them. I kept my head down, hidden by the bill of my cap. And then, the voice of God. The building's PA system, the one used for fire drills and bland announcements, crackled to life. It wasn't Maya. It wasn't management. It was a pre-recorded message, patched in by Sarah from the security room. A calm, digitized female voice spoke, echoing through the marble hall. Halcyon Tower welcomes its new owners, HLC Trust and Vireo Holdings. The sound was absolute. Everything stopped. Laurel's mouth snapped shut. Robert froze. All tenant and vendor contracts, the voice continued, are now under review by the new ownership group. Updated public information has been posted to the Rutherford County Registry. We apologize for any inconvenience during this transition. The message clicked off. Silence. Laurel, her face white, turned to the cameras. She forced the pity smile back onto her face. As you can see, she laughed, a high-pitched, desperate sound. We are experiencing a rather large technical glitch, a systems test. We're getting it sorted. It's just a test. Across the lobby, Kendrick, the beige lawyer, had finally arrived. He was breathless, his tie askew. He was staring at his phone, reading the PDF Eden had sent. He scrolled past the notice, past the affidavits. He got to page 38. I knew what was on page 38. It was the signature. It was the digital confirmation from the bank, their bank acknowledging the covenant breach and validating the transfer of the note to HLC Trust. It wasn't a claim. It was a receipt. Kendrick's face, usually a mask of beige indifference, went the color of drywall. He looked up, his eyes wide with genuine panic. He saw Robert. "Robert," Kendrick said, his voice a hoarse whisper, audible in the sudden hush. It's legal. The note, the bank, they signed off on the trigger." Robert heard him. The mask of the Titan cracked. He didn't yell. He did something worse. He looked small. His eyes scanned the lobby, searching, his fury now desperate. "Mia," he growled, almost to himself. "Where is Mia?" I was gone. I had pushed my cart into the service corridor. I was standing in the dark. By the service elevator Sarah had tagged for me. My heart was a hammer, but my hands were steady. I was still invisible. I was still a janitor in a dark hallway. But I was the janitor who owned the building. My burner phone vibrated. A text from Sarah. "Route to penthouse is secure. When do you want to unmask?" I looked at the elevator call button. I looked at my uniform. It was time. I didn't go to the penthouse. Not yet. The penthouse was a trophy. The lobby was a battlefield, and the battle was not over. I stood in the shadows of the service corridor. The door cracked just enough. I watched the chaos I had created. Laurel's PR team was in a frantic, weeping huddle by the dead ficus plant. Robert was pacing in tight, furious circles, his face a toxic shade of purple, still growling into his phone. "I don't care what the bank signed," he spat. "You find a judge, you find an injunction, you bury them." And Kendrick, the beige lawyer, just stood there, holding his phone like a dead bird, muttering, "The filing is clean, Robert. The filing is... it's perfect." In the center of this hurricane, Laurel stood by the podium her team had erected. She was shaking, but she was a Brooks, and a Brooks never, ever concedes the stage. She saw the cameras, not just her paid-for lifestyle bloggers, but the real press. The sharks from the Journal and the Chronicle, the ones I had invited, were all here, all filming, their faces lit by the glow of the biggest corporate story of the year. She saw an audience. She couldn't help herself. She tapped the podium microphone. The thump-thump echoed, cutting through the noise. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said. Her voice was a strained, high-pitched imitation of authority. "Please, settle down. As I was saying, the Brooks' new era. That was my cue. I pushed the service door open, the sound of my cart, the rhythmic squeak, squeak, squeak of the rubber wheels on the marble, returned. Every head in the room turned. They had seen the corporate fight. Now they saw the janitor, the one who had crossed the shot earlier. Pushing her bucket, I pushed the cart right up to the edge of the low stage. I didn't stop. I bumped the cart up onto the platform, the bottles in the bucket rattling loudly. Laurel stopped, her mouth open. The look on her face was not confusion. It was pure, unadulterated disgust. How dare this thing interrupt her? "Get out!" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Get off this stage." I parked the cart. I looked at Jules, the day guard, who was standing nearby, his hand on his sidearm, looking at me, then at the LED wall, then at Robert, then back at me. He looked like a man trying to solve a complex math problem in a burning room. "Jules," I said, my voice quiet, but clear. "The handheld mic, the one for the Q&A, please." He looked at me. He saw the janitor, but he also saw the name on the wall. He saw the woman who had brought donuts that morning. He slowly unclipped the microphone from his belt. His hand was shaking. He handed it to me. I clicked the on switch. A small green light glowed. I held the mic. "Excuse me," I said. My voice exploded through the atrium. The sound system was perfect. It boomed off the marble, silencing every conversation. Laurel flinched, as if she'd been slapped. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, looking at the podium, "but I need to clean up a small stain." The reporters, confused, looked around the floor. I looked directly at Laurel. A stain. On the record. A few of the journalists in the front row, the real ones, let out a sharp, appreciative laugh. "Who do you think you are?" Laurel finally shrieked, her composure shattering. "Security, Jules, get this woman out of here." But Jules didn't move. He was watching me. I held the microphone in my left hand. With my right, I slowly, deliberately, peeled off the thick, gray chemical-stained cleaning glove. I dropped it on the floor. I reached into the back pocket of my utility pants. Not the uniform, my pants. I pulled out the platinum card. The HLC card. Laurel's PR team had been frantically hammering at the control panel on the podium, the one wired to the main screen. They had been trying to get the HLC Trust logo off, trying to get their Brooks-era PowerPoint back up, but the system was locked. I walked to the control panel. "This seems to be frozen," I said to the room. I touched the platinum card to the RFID sensor. A single, loud beep echoed through the hall. The light on the panel flashed from red to green. "Security override," one of Laurel's tech-savvy flunkies whispered, his face going pale. On the massive LED wall, the simple, block-letter text of HLC Trust dissolved. For a moment, the screen was black. Then, it resolved. A new logo, a brilliant, clean design, the word Halcyon. But the O was a rising sun, a subtle curve of community. Beneath it, the new words, Halcyon Life Center. The screen split. A new window appeared. A live, high-definition video feed. Eden March. She was in her white office, perfectly lit, looking directly into the camera. She was calm. She was terrifying. "Good morning." Eden's voice boomed, perfectly synced, no lag. "For those of you on the tenant and vendor lists, you have already received my brief. For the press, allow me to clarify." Laurel and Robert stared, dumbfounded. "As of 2:07 a.m. this morning," Eden stated, her voice cutting, "following a catastrophic and documented covenant breach by Harbor Pike RE regarding their maintenance reserve accounts, the springing ownership clause of their primary loan note was activated. The deed for the property known as Halcyon Tower has been legally, finally, and irrevocably assigned. The new, undisputed owner of this property is the HLC Trust." The room exploded. Flashbulbs, shouting, reporters yelling questions. "This is illegal," Laurel screamed, finally finding a target. "That's not legal, Kendrick. Stop this." "It is, in fact," Eden said. as if answering her. The very definition of legal. All documents are filed and certified with the Rutherford County Clerk. The transfer is complete. Eden looked at the camera. I am the legal counsel for the trust. I am not the owner. Allow me to introduce the sole beneficiary of HLC Trust. The video feed of Eden shrank, moving to a corner of the screen. The main feed switched. It switched to the broadcast camera that was currently pointed at the podium. It switched to me. My face, under the brim of my dirty baseball cap, was suddenly 20 feet tall. I raised my hand. I pulled the cap off. I dropped it to the floor. I let my hair fall. I looked right into the camera. I looked at my father. I looked at my sister. My name, I said, my voice steady, amplified, and final, is Mia Rogers. I am the beneficiary of HLC Trust, and I am the actual, legal owner of this tower. The shock was so profound. The atrium was dead silent for 3 seconds. Then Laurel found her voice. It was a sound I had not heard since we were children, a sound of pure, primal betrayal. You stole this. You stole this from our family after everything we gave you, after everything Dad did for you. I turned the mic to her. I let her accusation hang in the air. I let every camera record it. Then, I turned back to the crowd. No, I said. My voice was suddenly cold, all emotion wiped from it. I didn't steal anything. I looked at Laurel, and at Robert, who was now advancing toward the stage, his face a mask of thunder. I bought the debt, I said, my voice cutting. The debt your company, Laurel, and your advisors, Dad, were too arrogant, or too lazy, to even look for. You were trying to buy the stock, a child's move. I bought the mortgage. I bought the note. I looked at my sister. I paid for this. I paid for it with the Kestrel Pier project, which you stole. I paid for it with the 8 months I spent in an ICU holding his hand while you were networking in Europe. I paid for it with the years I was told my designs were a hobby. I paid for it with the $40,000 severance check and the broken watch you gave me for a lifetime of work. I tapped the control panel. The Halcyon Life Center logo vanished, replaced by a timeline. Here, I said, pointing. This is the HLC Trust, formed 6 months ago. Here is the first transaction, the purchase of the mezzanine loan from the Singapore lender. Here is the second, the consolidation of the bond debt. And here, I clicked again. The screen showed the video feed from B2, the red with flashing covenant breach sign, time-stamped at 1:47 a.m. Is the proof that Harbor Pike was bankrupt, fraudulent, and in default for 288 days, the proof that you were about to buy a rotten apple. Dad, I just got to the bank before you did. Robert was at the foot of the stage, his hand gripping the edge. You used us, he growled, his voice low and dangerous. You used my stroke. You used this family as a springboard. This was it, the final accusation. I looked down at him, not at the Titan, not at my father, at the man who had ordered me to be his backdrop. I used the law. Dad, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. You used me. The atrium went dead quiet. You used me as an unpaid caregiver, I continued, my voice clear, every word a hammer. You used me as a nurse, as a physical therapist, and as a financial manager who discovered your CFO was stealing from you. And when you were done, when you were strong again, you threw me out. You reclassified me as an employee in your legal documents so you could fire me without a claim. I looked out at the press. Well, you were right. I was an employee. I was an employee of this building. I've been cleaning your toilets for the last 3 weeks. A collective, horrified gasp from the press. I could see the headlines forming in their eyes. And from down there, I said, my voice softening, on the floor, you see all the dirt everyone else misses. You see the covenant breaches. You see the real foundation. I turned from him. I looked at the cameras, at the stunned, hungry faces. This press conference, I announced, is over. The Brooks New Era is canceled. I checked my watch, the old cracked one he had given me. My press conference, I said. The one for the Halcyon Life Center. Begins at 12:45 p.m. in this room. At that time, I concluded, I will be introducing the building's new operational model, a model that doesn't put profit before people, a model that believes the foundation of a building isn't the concrete, but the human beings who keep it running. I clicked the microphone off. The green light died. I handed it back to a completely stunned Jules. I walked off the stage, past my father, past my sister. I didn't look at them. I walked back to my cart. I picked up the handle of the mop, the one with property of HLC written on it, and I pushed it. Squeak, 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 back toward the service corridor, leaving them alone in the wreckage of their imaginary empire. The story broke before the stock market even opened. My performance, as one blogger called it, had been filmed by a dozen phones. The footage of a janitor claiming ownership of the Halcyon Tower went viral before 7 a.m. It was raw, unedited, and utterly compelling. The financial press, however, skipped the drama and went straight for the legal filing. By 7:30 a.m., the Rutherford Business Chronicle had confirmed it. HLC Trust was the undisputed owner. The journal went further, publishing a 2-page spread titled, The Debt Bomb, How a Janitor Used a Covenant Breach to Seize the Halcyon. The pre-market trading for Brooks Urban Holdings was a bloodbath. The stock, which had been trading high on the expectation of the Halcyon acquisition, cratered. It plummeted 38% in 45 minutes. My father's new era had just evaporated $800 million of his company's market cap before his first cup of coffee. The rats, as I knew they would, were the first to jump ship. At 8:15 a.m., an email hit the new, firewalled HLC Trust server that Eden had set up. It was from Pioneer MEP, the Halcyon's primary mechanical, electrical, and plumbing contractor. They were the ones who managed the HVAC, the elevators, the lifeblood of the building, the very systems I knew were failing. Their letter was simple. It was addressed to HLC Trust, Atienne Ms. Mia Rogers. Pioneer MEP congratulates the new ownership on their acquisition. We have been concerned about the operational directives from Harbor Pike for several quarters. We have a full file of our recommendations that were ignored. We stand ready to transition our maintenance contract to your team and begin immediate, critical upgrades to bring the building to true spec. They were covering their own liability. They were admitting, in writing, that they knew about the failures. They were offering me their loyalty in exchange for my silence. Draft a reply. Eden, I said over the phone from my new, temporary office, the one Sarah had secured on the 50th floor, which had formerly belonged to Harbor Pike's CEO. Tell them I appreciate their transparency, and I look forward to seeing those files, all of them, today. By 12:45 p.m., the atrium was a different place. It was no longer Laurel's party. It was my boardroom. The PR flunkies were gone. The lifestyle bloggers had been politely and firmly uninvited by Sarah's new security team, A+ Security, who had taken over at 7 a.m. The room was packed, standing room only, with the toughest financial and civic reporters in the city. I wasn't in a janitor's uniform. I wore a simple dark gray dress, the one I would have worn to defend a thesis. I wore my mother's watch, not my father's. I stood at the same podium. This time, the massive LED wall behind me was mine. It displayed the clean new logo, Halcyon Life Center. Thank you for coming, I said. My voice was calm, no echoes of the morning's fury. This morning, HLC Trust took legal and operational control of this building. My name is Mia Rogers, and I am the new steward of this property. I didn't rehash the family drama. I didn't have to. It was the salt in the air. My first acts as owner are not about profit. They are about correction. This building's previous ownership group failed, not just in their financial duties, but in their human ones. I looked out at the crowd. I saw Rosa, Jules, and Amar, who I had personally invited. They were standing in the front row, in their street clothes, looking terrified and proud. Effective immediately, I announced. HLC Trust is terminating all third-party sanitation and security contracts that were in violation of state labor laws. We have signed new local vendors. I looked at Rosa. This includes a new building-wide wage standard. Every night shift employee, the people who clean your offices, who guard your assets, will receive an immediate 18% wage increase. Someone in the back gasped. Furthermore, I continued, every full-time contracted employee in this building, from the janitorial staff to the window washers, will be eligible for a comprehensive basic healthcare benefits package, paid for by HLC Trust. This time, there was a murmur. This wasn't business. This was a revolution. A building that runs on the precarious health of its own staff, I said, my voice sharp, is a failed building. We will not fail. A hand shot up, a reporter from the Chronicle. Ms. Rogers, that's a massive operating expense. How do you plan to pay for that? By not being fraudulent, I replied, my voice flat. The cost of the wage and benefits package is less than 1/10 of the money Harbor Pike was spending on failed lobbying efforts and kickbacks to PR firms. I saw the blood drain from a few faces in the crowd. Second, I said, this building is a fortress of glass and steel. It needs a heart. This morning, I received a call from the city council. I nodded to Councilwoman Singh, who was standing in the back. She asked about our plans for the third floor, which has sat empty for a year. I was pleased to confirm that the Halcyon Life Center will be donating, free of charge, 10,000 square feet of that space for a new Rutherford Community Health and Wellness Center. More flashes, more shouting. The press conference lasted exactly 15 minutes. I ended it and was immediately swarmed. Sarah and 2 new A-plus guards formed a wedge, guiding me to the private elevator. As the doors were closing, a hand, and a very expensive shoe, blocked it. It was Robert. He stepped into the elevator, alone. Kendrick tried to follow. Robert held up a hand, and the lawyer backed away. The doors slid shut. It was just us, in a mirrored, stainless steel box, shooting upward. The silence was thick and metallic. Kestrel Pier, he said, not looking at me. He was studying the grain of the steel wall. What about it? I asked. The project is dead. Your investors pulled out. The city permits have expired. It's a toxic asset. I know, I said. Brooks Urban Holdings can resurrect it, he said. Our new municipal bond rating. We can get the financing. The city will fast-track the permits for us. For me. Good for you. Dad, why are you telling me this? The elevator slowed. We were at the penthouse level. The doors opened with a soft ding. He finally turned to me. His face was a wreck. The morning's rage had burned out, leaving the ashes of a defeated, terrified old man. A war, he said, his voice raspy. This is what you've started. A war. The journal. The pre-market. You're trying to destroy me. You're trying to destroy this family. You did a very good job of that on your own, I said, stepping out into the empty penthouse. It was a vast, raw space, concrete floors, 30-foot windows, the entire city at our feet. Let's avoid a war, he said, following me. A partnership, Brooks Urban and HLC Trust. We co-develop Kestrel Pier. We issue a joint statement. Family united. We restore the stock. We both get rich. He was offering me a truce. He was offering me the very project he had dismissed as a hobby. I walked to the window. The Kestrel Pier site was a brown scar on the riverfront, visible even from here. My dream. No, I said. His breath hissed. What? Don't be a fool. Mia, this is your chance to get everything you've ever wanted. Your project? My money? I turned. I will not be your partner. Dad, I will be your owner. You are in breach of contract, and I am your creditor. You want to talk about Kestrel Pier? Fine. We can talk. I laid out the terms. There was no negotiation. 1, I said, full financial transparency. I get a permanent, non-voting seat on your audit committee. I want to see every dollar. From every kickback. From now on, that's impossible, he whispered. 2, I continued. Brooks Urban will finance 100% of Kestrel Pier. HLC Trust will co-develop my designs, my management, my ethical standards. The profit will be split 50-50, but my firm gets a non-negotiable 10% design and management fee, paid first. You're robbing me, he said. I'm billing you, I corrected. And 3, the most important one, I looked him in the eye. Laurel, his face tightened. What about her? She's a liability. She's sloppy. That Metasilv MOU was embarrassing, and the kickback she took from Vale's PR firm was amateurish. His eyes went wide. He hadn't known I knew. She is to be removed as CEO, I said. Never, he roared. She will be enrolled, I continued, as if he hadn't spoken. In a full-time 18-month executive management program, a real one, at Wharton or INSEAD, I don't care. She will have no title. She will have no contact with the company. She will learn what a balance sheet is. She will learn what a fiduciary duty is. And if she passes, she can reapply for a vice president position. That's the deal. Robert stared at me, his face collapsing. I had taken his money, his building, and now his heir. Laurel chose that moment to burst from the elevator. I will not, she screamed. She had clearly been listening from the hall. I will not be sent away like a child, Dad. Tell her that PR firm. They just dropped me. They sent me a bill. They said I was unmanageable. She was frantic, her mask of perfection totally gone, her hair wild. They're right, Laurel, I said. You are? She lunged at me. Sarah stepped out of the stairwell, seemingly from nowhere, and simply put a hand on her shoulder. Laurel stopped, checked by a force she didn't understand. Robert looked at Laurel, in her hysterical, unmanageable rage. He looked at me, calm, holding all the cards, owning the room we were standing in. He saw the end of his line. Eden will draft the memorandum of understanding, I said, my voice soft. 50-50, my designs, Laurel's education. He just nodded, a single, jerky motion. The signing was scheduled for 3 p.m., back in the atrium. I had one more thing to do. I called Amar, the engineer, to the penthouse. You were right, Amar, I said, showing him the efficiency logs. And you were ignored. I'm creating a new fund, the Halcyon Technical Scholarship. It's for the children of the night shift staff. Your son, Jules's son. Rose's daughter. He looked at me, confused. I'm funding it, I said. But it's tied to this. I tapped the logs. HLC Trust will contribute to this fund every quarter. So long as this building maintains a 99% operational standard, it's a bonus. But it's tied to our shared success. I need you to keep this building honest. You are my internal audit. Amar finally understood. I wasn't just giving him a gift. I was giving him power. At 3 p.m., the cameras were back. Robert and I sat at a simple table. Eden March placed the MOU in front of us. I signed, my hand swift and sure. Mia Rogers. Robert picked up the pen. He looked at the paper. The camera zoomed in. I watched his hand. It was shaking, a slight, but undeniable, tremor, the hand of a titan who had just lost his sky. He signed. The news cycle was ecstatic. The Chronicle praised the new labor policies as a moral correction to the gig economy. The Journal published a deep and surprisingly admiring analysis of the intelligent debt ownership model HLC Trust had used, calling it a masterclass in legal and financial jujitsu. I gave them one last quote. As I left the table, a reporter shouted, Ms. Rogers, what's your new philosophy? How will you make this building profitable? I paused, looked at the camera, and gave them the only answer that mattered. We are not in the business of building assets, I said. We are in the business of building lives. The profit will follow. For the first time in nearly a year, I drove away from the Halcyon Tower and did not go to a secure office. I did not go to meet Eden. I did not go to study blueprints. I drove back to my small, Fourth floor walk-up, the one with the peeling radiator and the view of a brick wall, the place where I had lived as a ghost while I plotted a war. The smell was the same: stale coffee, tracing paper, and the faint, dusty scent of my own isolation. Nothing had changed here. The Kestrel Pier blueprints were still pinned to the wall, a monument to a life I'd left behind. My drafting table was covered in a fine layer of dust, illuminated by the shaft of the afternoon sun. I had won a skyscraper, but I had been living in a shoebox. I walked to the closet and pulled down the small, tin box. My mother's box. I had taken her letter from it, but I had left the other things. I sat on the floor, the box in my lap. Beneath the old photos, me with a gap-toothed smile. My mother in a bright yellow dress was a stack of her own sketches. She had been a designer, too, a hobbyist. My father called her. She designed fabrics, furniture, spaces she dreamed of. I thumbed through them. A design for a curved sofa, a repeating pattern of willow leaves. And then, I stopped. I pulled out a single sheet of old, yellowed sketch paper. It was not a fabric design. It was a space, drawn in cheap, soft-leaded pencil, the kind that smudges. It was an atrium, a multi-storied, grand, open space, with light pouring in from a glass ceiling. There were trees, internal balconies, and small, curved pods for people to sit. It was not an exact match for the Halcyon's lobby, but the feeling was identical. The DNA was the same, at the bottom, in her familiar, elegant cursive. She had written one word: breathing room. I had sketched the Halcyon from this apartment, thinking I was creating something new, something that was just mine. I had been wrong. I had been finishing a conversation. My mother had seen the dream. Decades before I did, she had seen the Halcyon Life Center. I held the sketch to my chest, the cold, hard stone of rage that had lived in my stomach for a year. It didn't disappear, but it shifted. It felt, for the first time, like ballast, not just an anchor. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane back to the Midwest. I walked onto the campus of my old university, the smell of cut grass and old brick instantly transporting me. He was still there, in the same cluttered office. Professor Kiernan. He was a man of steel-rimmed glasses and unsparing criticism. He was the one who had told me my first-year designs were sentimental nonsense. He was the one who had taught me that a building's only true purpose is to serve the people inside it. "Kiernan," I said from his doorway. He looked up from a student's flawed model, his eyes focusing slowly. "Mia Rogers. My God, I thought you were dead. Or worse, I thought you were your father." I smiled. "I'm not." "I read the news," he said, leaning back, his voice a dry, academic rasp. "The Journal, the Chronicle, they're calling you a financial titan, a debt ownership guru," he snorted. "They're missing the point, as usual." "What's the point, Professor?" "You finally did it," he said, tapping a red pen on his desk. "It only took you 10 years. You found your voice. You just had to stop shouting." "I don't understand," I said. "Your early work," he said, gesturing to a shelf. "It was all loud. You were trying so hard to prove you were an artist, to escape the Brooks name, big dramatic gestures, cantilevers just for the sake of it. You were shouting. But this?" He held up his tablet, showing the article about the new wage standards and the community health center. "This is not a shout," he said. "This is a statement. You used the language of covenants, the language of finance, the language of your father, and you used it to say something I taught you, that a building is a social contract, that the people in the basement matter more than the name on the glass." He stood up, walked over, and looked at me, his eyes sharp. "You didn't just find your voice, Mia. You found it in the last place anyone thought to look. You found it in the language of architecture, the real language, the numbers, the rules. And you made them speak. I'm proud of you." When I flew back to Rutherford, there was an email waiting for me. It was not from my burner. It was to my new, public HLC Trust address. The sender was simply Laurel. I braced myself. I expected a legal threat, a demand, more vitriol. The email was 3 sentences long. I am enrolled at INSEAD. The program starts January 15th. I did not know about the PR kickback. I mean, I did, but I didn't understand what it was. I'm sorry. Sorry. A word I had never, in 34 years, heard my sister utter in a context that wasn't sarcastic. It was short. It was clumsy. It was self-serving, blaming her ignorance. And yet, for her, it was a seismic event. I thought about it for a full day. I thought about ignoring it. I thought about sending a cutting, cold reply. Then I thought about my mother's sketch. The breathing room, I replied. Write your study plan. Laurel, send me your curriculum. I'll read it. We can have one evening, once a week, to discuss it, not as sisters, as a CEO and an intern. She didn't reply, but 2 days later, a detailed 18-month study plan was in my inbox. That Friday, I didn't go home at 5. I took the elevator down to B1. The break room, the one with the horrible buzzing lights, was transformed. Mara Quill's team had been there. The walls were a soft, warm gray, with acoustic dampening panels that soaked up the sound. The cheap tables were gone, replaced by comfortable, modular booths, and the lighting. The lighting was perfect, indirect, warm, and fully dimmable. It felt like a lounge, not a holding cell, and it smelled of pepperoni. Boss is here, Jules shouted, his mouth full. The entire night shift crew, my old crew, was there. Rosa, Amar, Jules, and about 20 others, Apex cleaners and A+ security. I had bought 24 pizzas. It's amazing, Mia, Rosa said, her eyes shining. She wasn't looking at the pizza. She was looking at the lights. We can breathe in here. That was the idea. Rosa, I said, grabbing a paper plate. Jules came over, his face serious. The lights are great, Mia, but it's this. He pulled a card from his wallet, a new blue and white insurance card. Leo's therapy, he said, his voice thick, and he had to stop. The sensory integration program. They cover it, all of it. Before, I was paying $800 a month, out of pocket. I was taking payday loans, Mia, and now. He couldn't finish. He just tapped the card. Rosa put her hand on my arm. My cousin, she said, from the old company, the Halcyon People Fund. The check cleared. She got her $4,300. She cried for an hour. I looked around the room, at the people eating pizza, laughing, talking, people who were no longer invisible. They weren't just my employees. They were my foundation. They were the ones who had kept the building honest. The next week, I was standing in the lobby, my lobby, the Halcyon Life Center. Mara's vision was complete. The cold, sterile marble was still there, but it was warmer. The directory was no longer a list of faceless corporations. It was a community board. The 10,000 square feet on the 3rd floor was now the Halcyon Community Health Clinic, Rutherford Reading Room. I was standing in the atrium, watching. A young mother was pushing a stroller toward the community clinic, an actual doctor's office for people without high-end insurance. A group of teenagers, who would have been kicked out of the old lobby, were sitting in one of the new, public seating pods, using the free high-speed Wi-Fi for their homework. It was no longer a monument to capital. It was a breathing room. A reporter I recognized from the Chronicle approached me. She had been writing a follow-up piece, a Where Is She Now story. It's impressive, Ms. Rogers, she said, gesturing to the lobby. You've changed everything. But in 10 years, what do you want your legacy to be? When people look up at this building, what do you want them to think? I thought about my father. I thought about Laurel. I thought about their obsession with their name, their dynasty, their reflection in the glass. I don't want them to think about me, I said. I pointed to the new, bronze-cast wall I had commissioned, the Wall of Honor, where Rosa's name and Jules's and Amar's were engraved, right next to the architects and engineers. I don't care if they remember my name on the glass, I told her. I want them to know that the people inside the glass were respected. That's the only legacy that lasts. When I got home that night, there was a single, thick, cream-colored envelope on my doorstep. No security, no messenger, just left there. I knew the stationery. It was my father's. Inside was a simple 3x5 card. His handwriting, once so bold, was now thin, the tremor visible in the ink. I read your mother's journals, the ones she kept after you left for college. I didn't know. A single, declarative sentence followed. I was wrong. I held the card. I was wrong. It was the apology. It was the white flag. It was the concession of a king who had lost his kingdom and, in the silence, had finally heard the truth. I expected to feel a rush of forgiveness, a sense of closure. I didn't. I didn't feel rage, either. For the first time, when I thought of my father, I just felt quiet. The debt was paid. The long, agonizing, one-sided war I had been fighting since childhood was finally over. I didn't need to forgive him. I just needed to be free of him. I chose clarity over the long, messy, painful work of reconciliation. I chose to be done. I put the card in the tin box with my mother's sketch. I closed the lid. My phone buzzed. It was Eden. "You're in the news again," she said. Her voice was as flat as ever. "The community health center is a hit. The bonds are oversubscribed." "Good," I said. "Which brings me to my point," she said. "The Halcyon Green bond issuance, the final paperwork, it closes tomorrow. You need to sign tonight." "I'll be right there," I said. I stood in Eden's office at 9 p.m. The city lights spread out below us. She placed the final document on her desk. It was a thick, formal stack of papers that would unleash $200 million in capital, all tied to the new, sustainable, ethical standards we had set. I picked up the pen. I thought of the first document I had signed in this saga, the waiver, the non-compete, the $40,000 insult. I had signed that with a shaking hand, a handful of rage and shame. My hand now was steady. I signed my name, Mia Rogers. As I lifted the pen, I felt it, the last shackle. The weight of my father's laugh, the pity in my sister's eyes, the crushing, invisible burden of my entire past. It all just fell away. It was gone, like so much dust on a floor that had finally been swept clean. The atrium was unrecognizable. It was no longer the cold, marble tomb I had cleaned. It was a cathedral of light, packed with hundreds of people. The mayor was in the front row, the city council, the press, the real financial players, and in the newly designated public seating pods. The community, the citizens of Rutherford City, Mara Quill's new logo, the Halcyon Life Center, was projected in a soft, brilliant white on the LED wall. The air was buzzing, not with the hum of ventilation, but with anticipation. This was the official renaming ceremony. I saw my father, Robert, arrive. He was flanked by two nervous-looking Brooks urban executives. He wore his best suit, a mask of patriarchal dignity, as if he were attending a gala in his own honor. He was prepared, I knew, with a speech about the Brooks tradition of resilience. He had texted me, an order, "I will speak first, to frame the narrative, you will follow." I had replied with 2 words, "No, you." He would speak, but I would have the final say. He had reluctantly agreed, confident his performance would overshadow mine. Then, I saw her. I almost didn't recognize her. Laurel. She was not in her signature red, not in a power suit. She wore simple, dark gray slacks and a white blouse. Her hair was pulled back. She looked small. She did not walk to the VIP section. She did not try to find Robert. She walked to the section roped off for the building staff. I watched her approach Rosa, Jules, and Amar, who were standing together. She said something quiet, a question. Rosa, after a long moment, simply nodded. Laurel did not sit in the front. She did not sit in the back. She stood with them, in the rows reserved for the night shift crew. The mayor spoke first, praising the new era of corporate responsibility at the Halcyon. Then, he introduced my father. Robert Brooks walked to the podium, radiating the old-world power he so desperately needed to reclaim. He smiled at the cameras. "Thank you, Madam Mayor," he began, his voice resonant, the familiar baritone of command. "Today, we celebrate a transition, but we also celebrate tradition. The Brooks legacy has always been about building, about laying foundations that last. We are a family and a city that endures." He was trying. He was trying to absorb my victory, to reframe this entire event as a seamless, planned transition, a simple passing of the torch. "When we look at this magnificent structure," he continued, "we see the legacy of hard work." As he said the word legacy, the massive screen behind him changed. Robert didn't see it. The audience did. It was not the Halcyon logo. It was a photograph, a black and white, hyper-realistic shot. A pair of hands, chapped and raw, wringing out a mop. Robert kept talking. "A legacy of vision." The image changed, a close-up of a man's face, reflected in a server rack, his brow furrowed in concentration. Amar. "A legacy of strength." The image changed, a hand gripping a heavy-duty flashlight, Jules's hand, his knuckles visible, the beam cutting the darkness of a freight elevator. The crowd went silent. They were watching the real story unfold behind my father's oblivious speech. The slideshow continued. Photo after photo, the hands of electricians, of plumbers, of security guards, of the invisible. Robert, sensing the shift in the room, slowed. "The foundation of our city, the legacy." He faltered, turning. He saw the images. He saw the hands of the people he had never seen. He stopped. I stepped out from the side of the stage. I walked to the second microphone. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice clear and amplified. The room held its breath. I gestured to the screen, which now held a composite of all the hands. "My father is right. This is a day about legacy, but he's wrong about what it is." I looked at the audience. For decades, we've been told that legacy is the name on the glass, that it's the height of the steel, that it's the man who signs the check. "We were lied to," I said. "This," I pointed to the screen, "is the real legacy. It is the hands that polish the floors. It is the engineers who keep the lights on. It is the security team that walks the empty halls at 3 a.m. This is the foundation that my father and his entire generation forgot to see." The room was utterly silent. "Today is not a transition," I said. "It is a correction, and it begins with a few announcements." I paused. This was the crescendo. First, a legal correction. Eden March, in a sharp, dark suit, stepped forward from the side of the stage. She took the podium. "Good afternoon," Eden said, her voice crisp. "There has been some market speculation that the HLC Trust's ownership, while legally sound, remains fragmented due to outstanding junior bond notes. I am here to announce that as of 9 a.m. this morning, HLC Trust, in a private transaction, has acquired 100% of all outstanding debt and equity. We have consolidated all notes. There are no other partners. There are no other creditors. The ownership of the Halcyon Life Center is absolute, indisputable, and final." A quiet shockwave went through the press section. My father, who had perhaps been holding on to one last hope of a legal challenge, a way back in, visibly deflated. The door was not just locked. It had been welded, sealed, and the frame removed. "Thank you, Eden," I said, returning to the mic. Second, a financial correction. I looked out at the CEO of Medisilv, who was sitting in the third row. When we announced our profit and purpose model, the critics said that giving back to the community was a fast track to bankruptcy. They said that giving 10,000 square feet of prime real FS. He's a visionary. We signed the final lease this morning. Medisilv, a Fortune 500 company, will be the anchor tenant for the Halcyon Community Health Clinic for the next 20 years. They will be funding a state-of-the-art diagnostic center, open to all. The applause was stunned, then thunderous. I had not just proven the model was moral, I had proven it was profitable. Third, I said, the room quieting again. A personal correction. My gaze found Laurel. She was standing with the night shift crew, her hands clasped in front of her, looking at me. She looked terrified. For a long time, I said, my family operated on a model of scarcity, that there was only one seat at the table, that there was only one heir, that one daughter's light meant the other's darkness. I looked at my sister. That model is also bankrupt. Laurel, I said, please come up here. She was frozen. Rosa gently nudged her. Go on, girl. Laurel walked the long way around, up the steps, her heels clicking. The only sound. She stood next to me, a full foot away, not daring to look at the crowd. Laurel, I said, is not leaving. She is not exiled. She is starting over, like this building. I reached into my pocket and pulled out, not a key, but a card, a simple, white, photo ID card. I handed it to her. This is your new ID badge, I said, loud enough for the mic to catch. Legal, and Brooks Urban Holdings. It's an 18-month unpaid executive internship. You'll rotate through every department. You'll start on Monday, in the basement, with Amar. She looked at the card. She looked at me, her eyes wide. It was not forgiveness. It was not a pardon. It was a path, a hard one. Welcome to the company, intern, I said. She clutched the card and nodded. A single, jerky motion. She did not cry. She walked off the stage. And finally, I said, as the crowd tried to process the strangest family drama they had ever witnessed, a legacy correction. My father spoke of the Brooks legacy. I want to honor a different one, the one he erased. My mother, Elizabeth Lang. I pointed to the new bronze wall near the main entrance, the one that had been veiled. Today, I am officially announcing the Brooks Lang Fund, named for my mother and for my father, because legacy is something you earn. The fund will be endowed with 2% of the Halcyon Life Center's net profits every quarter, and its mission is simple: to provide university scholarships and supplemental pay for the entire night shift staff and their children, in perpetuity. That was when the dam broke. Rosa let out a sob. Jules put his arm around her. The applause was not for me. It was for them. I looked at Robert. He was standing alone, his entourage having backed away. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the new wall, the one Mara had just unveiled, the Wall of Honor. It had names: Rosa Velez, Jules Carter, Amar Singh, and dozens more. He looked at their names, engraved in bronze. He looked at the celebrating staff. He looked at Laurel, who was standing beside Jules, clutching her intern badge. He had a microphone at his podium. He could have interrupted. He could have fought. He did not. Slowly, deliberately. Robert Brooks reached up. He unclipped the live microphone from his lapel. He set it down on the podium, the small thud echoing. He turned, not to me, not to the cameras, but to the Wall of Honor, and he bowed his head. It was not a surrender. It was a concession. It was the end. I stepped back to the microphone. My voice was the only one in the vast, emotional hall. My father, I said, my voice quiet, laughed when he saw me with a mop. He thought it was the end of my life. He thought it was an insult. I looked at the clean, shining marble floor, reflecting the light from the atrium roof. My mother's breathing room. He was wrong. It was a key. That mop handle opened the penthouse because it reminded me of something he had forgotten. It reminded me of who the real foundation of any building is. The massive screen behind me changed one last time. It was not a photo. It was a live feed from our new, transparent accounting ledger. Night shift wage, %. Guaranteed rest hours 12. Environmental efficiency, plus 99%. The crowd was on its feet. The applause was a wave. A physical thing. I stepped off the stage. I walked to Rosa. I had one last thing for her. From beneath the podium, a guard brought out a simple object. It was my old mop, the one with property of HLC on the handle. But I had had it sent out. The wood was polished. The metal fittings were no longer rust. They were plated in bright, shining chrome. I handed it to her. "This is not a tool for servitude, Rosa," I said, my voice thick. "This is a symbol of honor. You are the foundation." She took it, her chapped hands on the chrome, and she held it like a scepter. The light from the ceiling hit the clean floor, scattering into 1,000 points, like stars falling upward. I looked out the massive glass doors, at the Rutherford city skyline. It was no longer a fortress. It was a window, and I was, finally, free. On the massive outdoor ticker, the one facing the entire city, the old stock data was gone. A new message, in clean, white, 50-foot-tall letters, began to scroll. "We do not inherit skyscrapers. We inherit the responsibility for the people inside." I smiled. The story was finished. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know where in the world you're listening from in the comments below. Please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it.